We are, folks. This is Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. So proud to be with you today. Listen, we've been studying of late something about Solomon and the reference between Solomon and Jesus Christ. They actually did just the opposite in the world. Solomon came in the world born to be an heir and a wealthy man, and given by God the wisdom to be wealthy. But Solomon did not have the wisdom that Jesus Christ had. He had a wisdom of the world, and he knew how to get along with the world. He knew how to answer any worldly question there was to answer. But many of the godly things he himself did not follow, and because of that, he found himself in a place where late at night or early in the morning his life was miserable, and when he was by himself he couldn't stand it. And we see that because he talks about all his vanity and vexation. He could see that. Yet the devil sowed a seed. Let's look at that. Adam, by one offense, Adam had the offense of sinning, and because he had that offense, he brought a national defense against God. The whole nation is against God because of the offense of Adam. We took on that seed of Adam, and now we become defensive against God. The only way we can turn that around is by getting rid of the guilt and vanity and vexation of the old life by saying, Jesus, I am a sinner. Forgive me of my sin, come in my heart, and save my soul. And I had that same exact thing that Solomon had, and I was a poor man. But there was no difference between the downtime of my downtime and Solomon's downtime. When you're away from God, and God begins to show you that, he shows you that to get up every morning, crack open a pack of cigarettes, pop off the top of a beer, and start in the world every day puffing on a cigarette and drinking a few beers, and by nighttime you're miserable. Everybody around you is miserable. You're ugly, and nobody wants to be around you, and you're drunk, and you pass out, and then in the morning you start the same thing over again. And you might try to find your answer in wine, women, and song. I did that. Everybody else that's a drunk did that. And that won't work. You have to come to the realization you need Jesus Christ to change your life. And when you do, and many of you who are listening to this probably were at one time in that category, and now you've asked Jesus to forgive you, your sin and come in your heart. Now you're looking for something to learn by. Well, I got news for you. PH Tidbits is a good place to learn. You can go to WOAK, the Oak, 90.9 on your computer, on LaGrange, Georgia.com, and find a radio station that's on 24 hours a day that has all Christian all the time, all 24 hours. Now we see that transmitted guilt was from Adam. He transmitted guilt to you and I that we see, and the Adam's sin brought that to us. Now we can't be, and the word is here, a pedagogue, or a person who turned around and preached to the past and say, hey, you bird, you wouldn't have done that if this and this and thus and so. Well, no, they didn't have what we had back in that day. They didn't have the ability to be filled with the Holy Spirit and have Jesus come on inside of their self and help them. And so we would be wrong to be condemning them for the way they were. By the way, we can't condemn anybody from Adam on, because we all are born with the same seed of away from God. And so they were our forefathers. Adam was our forefather. Anybody in the lineage of human beings was your forefathers. And they've come along. Mankind, we call mankind. We're different than animal kind. We're mankind. We're different than plant kind. We're mankind, made by God, and God breathed the breath of life into the first man, and he became a living soul. Now, when we speak of him, of Adam, we're speaking of one of our forefathers who sinned. And because he did, he passed that seed on. So, if we speak of ourselves as heirs of Adam, then we speak of ourselves as sinful and sinners. And that's what the redemptive promise of Jesus was. Now, we get back up to Solomon. Here's Solomon. He's the first king in Israel. He is a man who asked God a very wise thing. He said, I would like wisdom. And God said, because you've asked for it, I'm going to give it to you. And God gave him wisdom. Now, there was a greater than Solomon came, though, in Matthew 12 and 42. Let's read that. Matthew 12 and 42. Actually, let's go to 38 and read down. It said, there were certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answering, saying, Master, talking to Jesus now, we would see a sign from thee. They're asking Jesus for a sign. Now, I love what Jesus says right here in 39. Listen to this. But he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall be no sign given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And the men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, a greater than Jonah is here. Wow. And Jesus is saying, a greater than Jonah is here. And the queen of the south shall rise up in judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it. For they came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, a greater than Solomon is here. You remember when the Queen of Sheba came to Solomon, and he astounded her with all of his riches and his wisdom and everything, and she just couldn't believe it. And she gave him all of these things that she gave him. Let's look at it. It said, a greater than Solomon is here. Who was Solomon? This is who he was. In some respect, he was the greatest king of Israel. The greatest king Israel ever had, and the beginning was Solomon. He was the first. He was Israel's first monarch. Like in England, for instance, we're in the United States. We until we've got the president we have now, we never had a president that really wanted to be a monarchy, but we have one now that does. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is that kings in that day were monarchies. In some respect, he was the greatest of all the kings, and he was the first king. That one of his things that he did was it went beyond his boundaries of the land. He was promised a land to take care of, but he went beyond those boundaries of the land and went into other lands, made friendships with other nations. In one sense of the word, this sounds like it would be a good thing to do, but it caused him great grief in his life because he took on other nations. He made friends with them, allowed them to come and go into God's city, into God's land, and bring their idols with them. He had the freedom of having many wives, and he had many wives, and because he did, they worshipped other gods and caused him to end up worshiping other gods. His administration and his reign over all the kingdom was from the river Euphrates unto the land of the Philistines and unto the border of Egypt. He reigned over not just Israel, he reigned over all the land. A lot of people say, well, how come he married so many people? Do you know that there were people that knew that he could run over them if he wanted to? So the men, or the head man of the township or that place would come 100 or 200 or 300 miles. He would bring his daughter. Solomon would marry his daughter. Sometimes the daughter would stay there, sometimes the daughter would go back home with the father, but she was a wife of Solomon. And because she was a wife of Solomon, that piece of land came under the protection of Solomon. And people loved to be under the protection of Solomon. So nobody would come against them. They would say, we better not come against that little town. If we do, Solomon owns it, and he's going to come after us. And they knew that. So they left the people alone. So that's why Solomon had a lot of the wives that he had. Now, Solomon's accumulation, he accumulated because of the policies that he had. His provision for one day, listen to this, one day, 300 bushels of fine flour. Wow. 300 bushels of fine flour. 600 bushels of meal. That's ground grain meal. And 600 bushels of that. 10 fat oxen. 10 fat oxen. 20 oxen from the regular pasture. That's 30 oxen a day. Now we're talking about daily provision. 100 sheep that day. 40,000 stalls of horses and 12,000 horsemen. He had that in his hand on a daily basis. That's what he had accomplished and had. Now this provision that he had every day. When Solomon ate, he had 900 wives and 300 concubines. If you add 9 and 3 together, you get 10, 11, 12. 9, 10, 11, 12. That's 1,200 people eating every time he ate. But listen to this. All those 1,200 women had servants, had people over them that took care of them. So there was probably another 300 or 400 people in that. So there were several thousand people every single day, ate 3 meals a day on Solomon. Every day. Now, and they had all of this flour, all of these sheep, these bushels of stuff, and these fat oxen, and everything. Let me tell you, it took hundreds and literally thousands of people to kill these animals, cook them, take care of the hides, keep the place clean. Literally, it took a city all turning in one direction just to put the food on the table in Solomon's palace so that everybody could eat that was involved with Solomon, let alone everything else. They didn't have paper plates. They didn't have plastic forks and knives. Everybody had to use utensils. Somebody had to make all of the utensils. Somebody had to wash all of the utensils every day. Somebody had to, I'm telling you, this was not a little job. This was a masterful job. That was every single day for 3 meals a day. It was a masterful job. It took thousands of people to pull it off every single day. It wasn't something that happened one day and didn't happen again. It happened every day, day after day after day after day after day after day. Do you think that he could, in his little piece of land and pasture he had, could imagine to have 300 bushels, be able to kill 10 fat oxen and 20 oxen from the field? That's 30 oxen a day. Figure that up in a year's time, how many oxen that is. Wow. And they did it for years. Okay. Now Solomon had an education. His education, actually, the truth of the matter is, much of it came from God. His understanding excelled the wisdom of all the children of the eastern countries. all in the east over there where he was, all through Arabia, Syria, all through there, what we know today, all that land that we know over there today, including Egypt and all of that, his wisdom excelled all of the wisdom, even the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than all men. The Queen of Sheba came from afar off, and to prove, she wanted to prove to herself, and she came from far to see if she could be satisfied with what she had heard about Solomon. And Solomon satisfied her with the answer, and she was overcome and overwhelmed of his greatness. When she saw it, she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe all the people. Just the one main thing was all the people eating. Can you imagine the greatness of all the people eating? That would be like, what he was feeding would be like, actually, it was more people he was feeding than live in the town that I live in. There's probably only about a tenth in the town that I live in of what Solomon fed every day. And he fed them all every day. Can you imagine that? And his greatness was appreciated. She gave him 120 talents of gold, and of spices, very great stone, and the store, she brought camels loaded, I mean loaded with spices from where she came, and precious stones. And why did Solomon need gold, spice, and precious stones? I can see the spices being used, but the gold and the precious stones would be put in the house of God in a later time. All right. Solomon found versification in many things. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. People came from far and from near to hear the wisdom of Solomon. When he gave an answer to a question, it became one of his songs. He had things, if you read the Psalms and the songs that Solomon put out, you'll find that they are things that are said, that are written down as songs. Yet, listen to this. He possessed no satisfaction in his own life. Listen to him as he reasons about life. This is his reasoning about life. His reasoning was this, that it's vanity and vexation of spirit. And he said, I hated life. He hated life. What he did was all pleasurable. Drink a little wine, a little booze, take one of his women, and have a little fleshly pleasure as many times a day as he cared to take a drink and have fleshly pleasure. He could do that. And he found the end of that to be vexation of spirit. Listen, if all you please is the flesh, you will want in your spirit, and you'll die spiritually, and you'll not be alive spiritually. And we do that today. If you please, we act like little bitty Solomons today. We have a job we go to that affords us a little more money than we need to actually live on, so we spend that money on ourselves. We smoke cigarettes, we drink beer, we do things that are very, very, very harmful to our own flesh, that are harmful to our spirit, and we don't have anything to look forward to because our spirit is dead. You follow the devil and you're following a dead God who has a dead spirit. The only spirit he has is pleasure, and pleasure is a dead spirit. It goes nowhere. It's only pleasure for a moment of time. It's a fleeting thing. Pleasure is a fleeting thing. And look at another thing here. His heart was turned from the Lord. He married many strange women, and the results that he had to please them and to permit them to worship their false gods. Solomon was just another creature who declined after the eyes of the world had been focused upon him as a public figure. He was public figure number one. We have public figures today, number one. Can you name me a president that we had 10 years ago? He was a public figure for a while. He was a spokesman for the whole United States for a while. And then he was declined and put out by another. And another came and he stood up. Some of these presidents we have been very wise. Some of them have been very foolish. In the Bible days, there was very wise kings and there were very foolish kings. Here's a man that holds the title of the wisest king on earth, yet he was the foolishest king on earth when it came to godly matters. It doesn't matter how wise a man is in the world. What matters is how wise he is in godly matters. That's what matters. So, let's look at a comparison here. Here, Christ warns us, the one that came after Solomon, Matthew 12:42, yet is greater than Solomon, yet he is a king, and he is a priest, after the order of Melchizedek, the king and priest that came in the Old Testament. He is an antithenes. He was an antithenes. He was a one that came before, a few times before, and now he comes now being born of a woman. So Christ warns us concerning Solomon. His glory was artificial. It could even be compared to the meanest the meanest flower. Solomon in all his glory was not so well arrayed as a lily. He was not so well arrayed as a lily. Wow. But speaking of himself, Jesus declares in Matthew 12:42, he says, a greater than Solomon is here. He was speaking of himself. He was a king, and the greatness of him, he was also a priest. Solomon wasn't. He was a priest. And so he came. It's two things. Jesus declared that he was the answer that the world had been waiting for. He was the Christ, the Son of God, and that he was the one that contained the Holy Spirit himself. And when he would go to the grave, that he would send one greater than him, which was the Holy Spirit, who could come and live in all men at all times on the face of the earth. But Solomon's heart was not so, and Solomon's life was not so. Solomon hardened his heart against God and loved luxury. Wow. We have never been, the United States of America has never been in a period of time of luxury that is in today. And people are seeking luxury rather than God. They are seeking luxury, which is vanity and vexation of the soul and spirit, to live luxuriously. Christ's heart was melted because he loved sinners. But Solomon's heart was hardened because he loved pleasure. And he got hardened toward God because he loved the luxury of the world and the pleasure of the world. And he had it. All right, let's see. Solomon came into the world. He was destined to be rich, and he was. Christ came into the world, and he was destined to be poor. And he was. He said, somebody said, Master, where do you live? Take us. He said, follow me and I'll show you. And he said to them, the Son of God, the Son of Man, has no place to lay his head, has a rock for a pillow. God made of himself, Jesus made of himself, which was God in the flesh, walking on the earth, made of himself no reputation, that he had a place to live. This was not his home. He was passing through. For 33 years, Jesus was passing through this earth. The last 3 years wandering with no home, no place to lay his head, no shelter, no out in the wide open. And his mission and commission was to make disciples, that they would go out and they would pass on when he went to the cross what he told them to do, and they did. Now Solomon had the voice of administration. Christ heard the voice of accusation. The two, they were opposite. Everybody accused Christ, but everybody adorned Solomon. You know, when Solomon left here, though, it was just a very, very short time. There was nothing that he owned. Not anything was left. All the people that had reverenced Solomon when he was gone, the only thing they reverenced is what he had, and they saw what he had and how he lived, and they thought if they could get some of it, they could have something good, but they didn't. They had the same thing he had. It was all vexation of spirit, because look, if you've got a lot, and the wicked world out here is going to want what you got, and they're going to eventually end up taking what you got, and that's just the way it's going to be. Now listen, Solomon made a maximum and disobeyed it. He made a decree that the people would serve God, and disobeyed it himself, and served other gods from other places by bringing those women in. God made a law, and Christ obeyed it. Jesus Christ was the only human being that ever walked on the earth that kept the Ten Commandments. Nobody, no other pair of feet ever walked on this earth that kept the Ten Commandments other than Jesus Christ. He was the perfect man. Actually, when Adam was created, he was created a perfect man. Until Adam sinned, he walked in the same pair of shoes that Jesus did. But when he sinned, he was put away for that sin. So, let's get on. Solomon expected to be respected and to have honor. Christ should have had what Solomon expected and did have, but Christ didn't. Christ accepted disrespect and dishonor. He was disrespected by many. He was dishonored by many of his own people. These were the Jewish people. Jesus was a Jew, born in Jerusalem, born as a Jew, born in Bethlehem in a manger, born as all, A-L-L, all of the Old Testament said he would be. Thousands of statements about Christ being born, Jesus, the one who was born in a manger, told thousands of years before he would be born in a manger, said he would be disdained, talked about him going to the cross. All the prophecies of the Jewish Old Testament and the law, all of it was fulfilled in Jesus. Every single aspect of it was fulfilled in Jesus. And the coming of Solomon, a new world of thought, was to be opened up to the Israelites. With the coming of Christ, a new experience of salvation was to be offered to the world. See, Solomon preached wealth, health, wealth, and charm and all that. And Jesus came along and said, all of that is not what I'm about. I'm about spiritual life. I'm about what you need. You need salvation from this world, from all of that pleasure, from all of that stuff that doesn't do anything but feed the flesh and make a man follow the devil further. A change came in the nation through the world which Solomon opened. Solomon brought forth the pleasure world. and the world of many wives, and the world of open sex, wild living, and all of this. Solomon brought on this stuff, but Christ didn't. A change came in men's heart through the abundant grace of Christ that he offered. Solomon only offered physical satisfaction. Jesus came along and offered spiritual and physical satisfaction. You know, since I've got saved, I've had physical satisfaction in my life because God is on my side and he helps me. So I've got physical satisfaction as well as spiritual satisfaction. Wow. Solomon was tempted by the wicked and fell. Christ was tempted by the adversary and overcame. You remember? He had fasted 40 days and nights, and the devil came and accused him of this and that, and told him, said, look, here's some stones, make bread out of them. Jesus could have just spoke bread. He said, just said the word bread and picked it up. It would have been bread. The devil knew that too. And he was hungry. And the devil's going to come after you when you're hungry and when you're sick. He's going to come after you the hardest in your weakest point. When you're in your weakest point, the devil's going to come after you in your weakest point. Solomon was felled by the wicked. Solomon offered sacrifice of animals for his sin. Christ offered the sacrifice of himself for our sin. Not for his sin. Jesus had no sin. He hung on a cross deliberately, gave himself. They didn't take his life. He gave it. They did not kill Jesus. He died. He didn't have to die. He could have overrode death. But he died for you and I. Man. Solomon standing, surrounded by national defense. Christ stood alone, experienced national offense. The nation of Israel offended God in his face by killing his son, putting him on the cross. But you know what God said? You know what Jesus said? Forgive them. They know not what they do. Forgive them. They know not what they do. Wow. Just think of that. They hung him on the cross and he said, forgive them. And he'll forgive anybody today, Jew or Gentile. If you aren't a Jew, my friend, you are a Gentile. Jew or Gentile. And God will forgive anybody who says, God, forgive me of my sin. Come in my heart and save my soul. Repent from their sin. Turn and go another way. Well, this is Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. I'm going to sign off on this one. I'll be back one of these days or soon, and we will be with you. There's plenty of these to look at. If you'll look up faithlagrange.com, that's in LaGrange, Georgia, in the United States. If you look up faithlagrange.com, we stream our services live there. You can find us at that. We have a very, very good preacher there that's on every day. You can, anytime you want to punch on there, you can find it. And many things happening there. It would be a good church to pattern a church by and behind. We do many events a year. We would be more than willing to share with you how to put these events together, how to make them work, that souls might be saved. This is what we're all about. Saving, getting souls saved. This is what we're all about. We will see you next time, Brother Peter, with tidbits from the Word. Bye-bye.